Oh, hi there, Ollie Anderson here. Welcome to this video about negative thoughts and a practical technique or series of steps that you can use to train yourself to gain mastery of the hamster wheel in your mind so that you don't have to focus on your problems all the time, so you don't have to worry unnecessarily about things that you can't change or can't control, so that you can abolish that little voice in your head that's telling you you're not good enough, or that you should feel bad about certain things, or blah, 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 whatever it is that is holding you back from focusing on the real life that you want to be living. In this video, I'm going to talk about what the hamster wheel is, where it comes from, what we can do about it, and how we can take practical action to make sure that we are no longer being held back by said hamster wheel, but instead that we are focusing in a direction that we actually want to go in and moving in the way that we are called to move when we've been most real with ourselves. So let's see where this takes us, because, life's too short to be thinking negative thoughts. And I've seen a thing or two in my life and in the lives of the people I've worked with that is going to help you to solve this problem. So let's begin this video with a definition of what the hamster wheel even is in the first place. This isn't just some metaphor that I've pulled out of my ass and decided to make a video about. The hamster wheel is a noted phenomenon in the scientific communities. And as we all know, if scientists say something, then it must be true. And in this particular case, the group of scientists that have validated this metaphor of the hamster wheel are cognitive psychologists who work with the brain, and they look at the science of the brain, and they do brainy things with their brains to understand the brain. And what they have basically said that is relevant here is two things. First of all, they noticed these things that they labeled ANTS, A-N-T-S. That stands for automatic negative thoughts. Now, I haven't read any studies about it or anything because I don't have time, but basically, I did look at the Wikipedia page, and what the scientists have concluded is that a lot of us have ANTS, which just means automatic negative thoughts that swim up from somewhere and then just plague us as we go about our day, following us around, negative chatter, blah, 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 blah. And obviously, if you find yourself in that situation, being chased by ants non-stop, well, that's going to cause you to feel bad about yourself. It's probably going to hold you back. It's probably going to stop you moving, stop you doing the things that you want to do. And so ideally, what you want to do, if you can do, is to forget about ants and to train yourself not to live on autopilot, but to live in a real way. So the first thing that contributes to the hamster wheel is that ants. The other thing that these neuroscientists or cognitive psychologists or whoever the hell they are, I can't remember, the second thing that they've noticed is that 80%, let's say, I just pulled that percentage out of my behind, but there is a large percentage, let's say, 80%-ish of our thoughts are repetitive. So not only are most of us walking around automatically having all these negative thoughts, automatic negative thoughts, ants color our days, but worse than that potentially, we're just thinking the same thing again and again and again and again and again. And that's why it's called the hamster wheel, because constantly we're automatically, because we're not present in life, thinking the same old thing again and again and again, around 80% of the time. And not only that, but the things that we are thinking are just negative. Now, where does the hamster wheel come from? Why is life like this? That's what we need to figure out in this video. And I have a few theories, but for the sake of simplicity, we can simply say that the hamster wheel is the illusion that things are changing, that things are moving, but actually it's just the same old scripts, the same old patterns, the same old schema, the same old negative beliefs, the negative thoughts, repeating themselves ad infinitum and holding us back from the life that we really want by basically putting a veil between us and life that filters our focus. How can you focus on your real life if you've got all this shit going on in your head? The answer is you can't. So what can you do about it? How can you get off the hamster wheel? Let's have a wee gander and see if we can find out. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what to actually do about the hamster wheel, I want to break it down a little bit more. So we've already said that ultimately there are two main qualities to the hamster wheel. One is automatic and two is repetitive. If you understand those two things, if you have awareness of that, then you can actually start to change your relationship with yourself and with the hamster wheel, because you know that if you're not present, you're not acting in a conscious way and making choices from one moment to the next about how you want to be responding to life, then you're just going to be getting the same old stuff. So that's enough for you to actually start making changes in your life. But there are 4 other elements to the hamster wheel that I want to break down a little bit more. One we've already talked about, which is the ants themselves. But there are 3 others, and then a bonus 5th thing that kind of brings it all together, where if you have awareness of this, you can actually make some kind of dramatic changes in your life and train yourself not to be held back by the hamster wheel. So the main thing about ants is that they're ultimately a reflection of where you think you've been in the past. They're a reflection of the self-hypnosis that you're putting yourself through, the constant chatter, to state the obvious, in your mind because of unresolved emotional stuff, shame, guilt, and trauma. And they're also a consequence of the judgments that you pick up about who you should be based on social conditioning, social standards, and external ideas that you've picked up and internalized about how you should live your life and show up in the world. Now, the reason that ants are so dramatically powerful in our lives is because, like I said, they create a filter between who we really are and everything that we see in the world and focus on. The reason that they are automatic is basically for 2 main reasons. One, because of the unresolved emotional stuff that I talked about. If you have unresolved shame, guilt, and trauma, then you will at some level have become disconnected from yourself. Because the main way that we deal with shame and guilt and trauma is that we disown whatever it is that we've perceived within ourselves that we think we should feel those emotions around. When we do that, that's when we create an ego version of who we are. And we basically end up trying to act like all these other things that we're hiding no longer exist. But the problem is, those things never go anywhere. They're still bubbling away in your shadow beneath the surface of your conscious mind, and they're going to keep sending messages up that are trying to pull you back home. And so a lot of automatic negative thoughts are just that. There's something going on inside you trying to bring you back to your realness. And until you start acting on something real, your true values and intentions, those thoughts are going to keep coming. That's why they're automatic, because you're always disconnected from who you are. The other side of the coin, though, is social programming, like I said. And so a lot of automatic negative thoughts, ants, are ultimately external voices that we have picked up somewhere over the course of our lives, whether it's our parents, teachers, society at large. And it's basically given us a set of criticisms or standards that we hold ourselves accountable to, where we're basically just judging our actions and the results that we're getting in life non-stop according to. So for example, maybe you had really strict parents who made you feel like if you showed emotional stuff, then you were weak. And that could be like any emotions. Maybe they tried to cause you to withhold your anger or your joy or your love or whatever it is. And whenever you express that emotion now, the little hamster wheel starts to turn and to say, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. And so ultimately, whether it's internal fragmentation because of shame, guilt, and trauma, or external social conditioning that you've internalized, all of those things are unreal. And what you need to do is to put yourself back on the path towards growing real and living the life that you're supposed to be living, instead of either holding yourself back from yourself internally or holding yourself back from yourself externally, which both have the same consequence of causing you to freeze up, stop moving, and then have the hamster wheel go round and around and around with these automatic negative thoughts. The second thing that keeps us on the hamster wheel is cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are just any conceptual way of thinking that block our view of the truth and block our view of reality. There are loads of different ones, but just for the sake of demonstration, there are two that are really common. One is black and white thinking, either or. Anytime you fall into black and white thinking, you're in the realm of the ego and the hamster wheel that keeps it going. Black and white thinking is ultimately a way of attaching to one judgment over another so that you can feel a sense of security and safety and certainty in life, instead of getting into the gray area of the truth, where it's not really about good and bad, black and white. It's just a nebulous kind of thing that keeps changing and evolving. And if you want to keep changing and evolving, you have to go with it. But anyway, for the sake of the hamster wheel, black and white thinking keeps us on that path of going round and around in circles, because black and white thinking is always disconnected from the truth. And the only reason that we're on the hamster wheel in the first place is because we're trying to avoid the truth about ourselves at some level. Another cognitive distortion, as an example, is catastrophic thinking. So for some people, the smallest thing in the world can happen to them and instantly it gets blown out of proportion into a big catastrophe. That is so that they have a reason to not change things, to not solve whatever little problem has happened, but to stay on the hamster wheel, which they've become accustomed to living on, so they don't actually have to allow themselves to come back into the picture by facing the shadow stuff and, facing shame, guilt, and trauma, all that kind of thing. And so instead of changing anything, they just stay on the hamster wheel, which makes it seem like things are happening, seem like things are changing, because obviously if it's going round, something's happening. But actually, because it's automatic and repetitive, like we said, nothing ever changes. And so those cognitive distortions are just another building block that keep us stuck on the hamster wheel and not getting where we really want to be. The third thing that keeps the hamster wheel in place is worrying or ruminating or brooding about things that we can't control. I used to worry in my own life about so many things. Perhaps the biggest thing I used to worry about, because I had some health issues, was death. And for a while in my life, I was just worrying. I was fixated on this problem I had, that I was going to die one day. We're all going to die, obviously. But for me, I was a bit kind of obsessed with it. I'd wake up in the morning, worry about dying, go to sleep at night, worry about dying, brush my teeth, worrying about dying. You name it, in the back of my mind, the hamster wheel was going round and making me think about death. In the long run, that turned out to be a good thing, because once I accepted it, I kind of woke up to all this stuff that I'm talking about, and I realized that time is precious, life is a gift, blah, 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 blah. That's another story for another video. The point is, sometimes we worry about things that we have absolutely zero control over. And death is a really good example of this, because we can't control it. We know it's coming, but there's nothing we can do. And if you look at your life and the things that keep you on the hamster wheel, the thoughts that you're having, a lot of the time, you're going to be worrying about things that are totally beyond your control. You have zero control over it. And so if that's true, there is no point worrying about it. The only things that you should worry about are the things that you can do something about. And in that case, even then you don't actually have to worry, because as soon as you know what you're going to do about it, what the solution to the problem is, well, it's no longer worry, it's just action. And so the worry kind of dissipates and dissolves. If you find that there is something in your head that you are constantly fixated on, constantly brooding over, constantly thinking about and worrying about, that you can't change, then that is the hamster wheel. And it is a problem that only exists in your head, because the hamster wheel wants you to stay exactly where you are. Most problems break down into three categories, basically. There are things that we have zero control over, in which case it's not really a problem, it's just part of life. Death is a good example of that. Like I said, you can't change it, so don't worry about it. All you can do is see what is stopping you, what is holding you back from accepting that that is part of life. And once you figure that out and you move towards acceptance, which is always the final lesson, you will no longer be worried. And the hamster wheel will slow down and stop because you've trained yourself not to worry. The second level is things that we have some control over, but not total control over. So for example, maybe you're in a relationship with someone and you're constantly arguing about the same old little issue. Could be nothing. Maybe you're arguing about some methodology for washing the dishes or something. You can't control that person completely, but you have some control over the conversation that you can have. You have some control over figuring out a way of negotiating over this dishwashing methodology or whatever it is. Could be anything. The point is, there are some things that we have some control over. In those cases, you still don't need to worry. You just need to figure out what you can control. And as soon as you do that, you start moving towards the actions, the hamster wheel slows down, and then you can just move on. And you're not going to be driving yourself mad with automatic, repetitive thoughts. The third level is the stuff that you have total control over. So for example, maybe you like working out. You can decide how much weight you lift, what time you work out, how long you're going to work out for. Those things you have control over, well, you don't need to worry about those in any way, shape or form, because it's totally up to you to act on it. And so that is the third thing that keeps us on the hamster wheel, not realizing that there are some things we can control, so we can do something about it and not worry. And there are some things that we can't control, and so we don't need to worry about it because it's just irrational and pointless because there's nothing we can do. The fourth thing that keeps us on the hamster wheel is the scripts, patterns, and schema that we've been following our whole lives without knowing. These are basically just patterns that we have learned in relationship dynamics, and they cause us to identify in an unreal way that holds us back and causes us to just act on autopilot in a repetitive manner. And that's because they're part of the hamster wheel. It's just conditioning going round and around in our brains, causing us to do the same old thing over and over again and to hold back from growing. Now, we could talk about this all day. Maybe I'll make another video one day or something. But as a simple example, just so you know what I mean, a script that people commonly follow is to be a people pleaser. A people pleaser is somebody who has learned in the past, normally in their interactions with their parents or whoever it was, they've learned in the past to not put themselves first, to hold back from expressing what they really want to express, from not saying no when they actually want to say no, etc, etc. And when people find themselves following a script like that, it just puts them on the hamster wheel and it keeps them going around and around and around, same old stories, same old results. And it's because of the same problem that unites all of these different building blocks we've been talking about. And that's being unpresent because you're in the ego, not in reality. So that brings us on to number 5, which is ultimately the glue that holds all of these things we've been talking about together. And that is the ego. I talk about this all the time because it's the main problem in all of our lives. And ultimately, it is a false identity that we have picked up that causes us to constantly distort, resist, and block our relationship with the truth. And that's ultimately what this video is now going to be about. How the hamster wheel is the constant illusion of untruth playing in our minds again and again and again like a broken record. And by doing that, by playing that record, we are ultimately taking ourselves away from the natural drive that we all have towards wholeness and growth and expansion. Like I said, the hamster wheel is just a distraction that keeps you in a kind of passive state where it feels like you're doing something, but you're actually just hypnotizing yourself with the same old nonsense that is holding you back from what you actually want. And if you understand that, then you can make this very simple, because the hamster wheel and all of the building blocks that we've spoken about are just the illusion of a false identity that you've picked up, and all of the little scripts and ideas that you need to follow to keep that illusion in place. And if you can understand that, then you can shift yourself into a different way of being, where it's not about maintaining the illusion of ego, but about putting yourself on a path towards something real that is going to allow the hamster wheel to just collapse and crumble and stop holding you back. So now we're going to get into the more practical side of this video. But ultimately, what we've said so far is that a lot of us have this automatic, repetitive hamster wheel playing around and around like a broken record in our brains. And because we identify with something that is making us believe that that is how things are supposed to be, then it keeps going on and on. Some people spend their whole lives on the hamster wheel, like the Thoreau quote where he said, "Most men live lives of quiet desperation." The reason most men do live lives of quiet desperation is because we're on the hamster wheel. And if you want to live a life of the opposite of quiet desperation, which is like loud liberation or something, well, you need to get off the hamster wheel. Basically, that's what it boils down to. So how do you do that? What you need to understand is that the hamster wheel itself is not the problem. The hamster wheel is a symptom of the fundamental problem, which is the disconnection from your realness and from your true self. Like I said, if you become disconnected from yourself because of shame, guilt, and trauma, or because of social conditioning, or a cocktail of the two, then you end up creating this false version of who you are, the ego, and the ego ends up using all the different building blocks we've been talking about to keep you in this passive state of just going around and around in circles your whole life, in some cases, and not getting where you need to be. And so the solution to this problem is to get off the hamster wheel of staying the same and buying into the ego by moving in a more real direction. And the way that you do that, a practical way that you can do that, is a two-step process. One, you need to create a vision for yourself. And then two, you need to train yourself every day to manage the negative thoughts and patterns and etc. that show up on the hamster wheel, so that you can deconstruct those thoughts and create something more real in the way that you think that's in alignment with your vision. So I'm going to show you some tools and techniques to do that. I'm going to give you a free download that you can use to manage and track your thoughts. And if you do this for 30 days at least, 60 days, and you'll be a different person, then I guarantee you're going to get results, and the hamster wheel is no longer going to be holding you back. So before we break down those two practical steps a little bit more, let's just have another really quick, simple look at what the hamster wheel is. Here's a diagram to show you ultimately what we're talking about. It's a cycle that never ends of your emotions, shame, guilt, and trauma, causing you to think in a certain negative way that causes you to focus in such a way that the behaviors, the actions that you take are unreal. And because they're unreal, well, that just causes you to repeat the cycle. If you take unreal actions, then you're just going to uphold the ego, and the fundamental problem of disconnection is not going to be resolved. And so your emotions are going to continue to be negative. You're going to keep thinking negative thoughts. That's going to cause you to take more unreal behaviors, whether it's just doing the wrong thing in the sense of not taking actions that are aligned with your true values and intentions, or whether it's distracting yourself with bad habits and all that kind of stuff. And so you just keep going round and round and round. Now, you could probably attack these things one at a time, but in a way, they're all symptoms of just not being real, of not moving towards wholeness and growth and evolution and expansion in the first place. And so the solution, the way out of this cycle, is to break through at the level of the fundamental problem. And because the fundamental problem is about not moving towards wholeness, well, you need to figure out what wholeness, realness, looks like for you, and then become the person, the version of you that is aligned with that. That is the quickest and best way to get off the hamster wheel. I've seen this in my own life, I've seen it with my clients, and if you do the stuff I'm about to tell you, negative thoughts are not going to be a problem anymore. So the first step, and maybe the most important one that we need to talk about, is how the easiest way to change your focus from all of the negative stuff that the hamster wheel keeps showing you and causing you to focus on is to shift gear and to create a purpose that is real, is compelling, and that gives you something better to focus on than all of the hamster wheel stuff. The reason that a lot of people find it so difficult to get off the hamster wheel is because they don't have a purpose that they've chosen for themselves. They have a purpose that their parents told them to follow when they were a kid. They have a purpose that society told them to follow. They've never really sat down and asked themselves, what are my true intentions? What are my true values? And how can I bring those values into my life? If you understand what those things look like for you, then you don't have to focus on all this stuff that the hamster wheel keeps showing you. You can focus day by day on moving towards a real vision for your life and how you want it to be. And as long as you are disciplined, consistent, and focused, and you take action every day, then sooner rather than later, you're going to start getting evidence that this vision is materializing and that you're becoming who you want to become. And for most people that I've worked with, once they get to that stage, they start getting evidence that things are working out in the way they want to, then all of the negative thoughts of the hamster wheel, the unreal thoughts that are rooted in ego, start slipping away. And normally, if you get rid of one unreal thought and you realize and learn how you did it, well, it's much easier to get rid of all the other unreal thoughts as well, because they all operate in the same way. It's just the ego trying to get you to focus on this stuff instead of the real stuff that you want to be focusing on and moving forward towards day by day. So how do you do it? I've made some videos about values. I have a free 7-day course called the 7-Day Personality Transplant System Shock for Life, Realness and Life Purpose, which can help you to really go deep into this. But the short version, for the purposes of this video, you need to figure out your values: truth, freedom, creativity, humor, health, whatever it is. You need to figure out how you would bring more of those into your life. You need to look at a picture, basically. You need to look at creating a picture of what you want your life to be like. What do you want your relationships to be like? Where do you want to live? What do you want to do? What hobbies do you want to have? etc, etc. Start off being audacious. Don't talk yourself out of it from the get-go, but create some kind of a vision for the direction you want to move in. Make sure it's real and it's not just a way of hiding from yourself because it's motivated by ego and the hamster wheel. And then you break it down. You break it down into milestones. Then you have goals for yourself. Then you look at your day-to-day routine. You create habits. And ultimately, that's it. You create a way of being in the world day by day that is going to move you towards your highest vision for yourself. If you focus on that, then the negative thoughts have to slip away. But the second part of the process is training yourself to shift focus from the hamster wheel to the vision that you want to be moving towards. And that is the next step in this process. So the first step in this process is creating a vision for yourself that is going to give you something real to focus on. The key word there is focus. The second step is to train yourself day by day to be able to catch your thoughts, basically your negative thoughts, your hamster wheel thoughts, and to not react to them automatically and repetitively, but to shift focus onto the vision. And the way that I recommend doing this is to use a thought log. This is a tool from CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, but actually there's a template that I use, and I'm going to show you with my clients, that I've tweaked a little bit just to add this extra step of focusing on the vision. If you can focus your thoughts, or retrain your thoughts, to shift into a focus on the vision, then they're not going to hold you back. And the reason I can say that so confidently is because most of these unreal, repetitive thoughts are completely irrational anyway. They're irrational because, like we said, they're not grounded in what's actually happening right now in truth, in the present moment. It's just old scripts, old patterns, old behaviors, outdated software trying to control your life. And so you can train yourself, especially if this is something that you struggle with, like quite vehemently, you can train yourself by simply sitting down day by day for at least 30 days, although it might take some of you longer, at least 30 days, and to go through this process that I'm about to show you. So I'm going to show you now a template that I've used with my clients. It works. And if you're suffering from this issue of the hamster wheel, create the vision and then train yourself using this tool to focus on it and to act on it, of course. So this template that you can see is something that you can download. There's going to be a link somewhere around here. It's really, really simple. The hard part is making sure that if you need this, you use it every day without fail for at least 30 days. For some people, depending on how powerful their hamster wheel is, it may be a bit more. But as long as you have that vision and you know which direction you actually want to be moving in when you've been real with yourself, not unreal because of the hamster wheel, then you'll get results. As long as you're consistent with this and then take the actions that you figure out you need to take. So what are the 5 stages and why does this work? Well, the 5 stages are really simple. It's an event, something that happens to you, the thought that you have because of this event, the behavior or consequence of thinking in that way, which also includes feelings, a rational counter statement. That is the point where you actually you stop and reflect and respond to the thought instead of just reacting to it, and you put it in a more rational light. When you've done that, you can move on to the 5th step, which is to figure out how this fits in with alignment with your vision and then act on it. So let's have some quick examples, right? Let's say that the event is you fail a test. You've got some kind of a test, a driving test, whatever it is. You failed it, and that event causes you to have the thought that you're not good enough, or that you're always making mistakes, or you're just inherently a failure, or whatever it is. All of those thoughts, if you've not been aware, are going to be some hamster wheel thing that you've been automatically repeating probably for your whole life. Anyway, when you get the thought, the next step is to think about the behavior or consequence of that thought. So for a lot of people, let's just say they have the thought that they're a failure, that they're no good, that blah, 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 blah. They try and find some way to cope with the feelings that that thought causes to arise within them. Maybe they go out and get pissed. Maybe they eat a whole tub of ice cream. Maybe they start texting their ex or whatever it is because that makes them feel that they can fill the void. Whatever it is, there's going to be some consequence of that thought, and you need to become aware of it by writing it down, paying attention to it. Once you've done that, you have basically enough information to get a rational counter statement, which is the next step. The rational counter statement might be something in this case like, okay, well, I failed my test, but that doesn't mean I'm a failure. It actually just means that I have learned something about driving that's going to help me with my next test. And so I'm not going to feel bad. I'm going to look forward to taking the next one. And in the meantime, I'm going to move to the 5th stage. I'm going to focus on my vision of creating a business or doing this or doing that and not eating this tub of ice cream or texting my ex or whatever coping thing I'm doing. I'm going to stay real. I'm going to get off the hamster wheel and I'm going to move in the direction that I want to move in. So this has been a fairly long video, but if you can do those 2 things of figuring out a real vision for yourself and moving towards it and training yourself to catch the hamster wheel thoughts whilst they're going around and then stopping them so that you can focus on a real direction and becoming the person that you want to become, then negative thinking is going to be way less of a problem in your life. Bad things will still happen. That's just life. That's how it goes. But even in those cases, you're going to be able to catch the thoughts before they end up on the hamster wheel and keep you stuck in a passive state that you don't want to be in. You're going to train yourself ultimately to always be moving, always be growing real, and always be doing something that actually matters to you, instead of just living that life of quiet desperation on the hamster wheel. And so ultimately, what have we learned in this video? We've been through the 3 stages of transformation that I'm always talking about: awareness, acceptance, and action. We've raised awareness of the hamster wheel. We went into it in quite a lot of detail. We know ultimately that it's about an automatic process of repetition that just keeps going around and around and around until we figure out how to put a wheel in the spokes, so to speak, and stop it. We've accepted, because awareness, acceptance, and action, we've accepted that the hamster wheel is not the problem in itself. Negative thoughts are not a problem in themselves. They're a symptom of disconnection. They're a symptom of fragmentation within ourselves, because we created this ego version of who we are because we've disowned something real, true values, true intentions, etc. And so if you understand that the hamster wheel is a symptom of that disconnection, then you can move into the 3rd stage of action, of taking the actions that are going to allow you to become who you need to become. That's having a real vision. But because the thing that is stopping you from moving towards that real vision is the hamster wheel, you may have to do this extra work of training yourself to manage your thoughts by monitoring them, catching them in their tracks, figuring out how they work, and actually day by day, just literally sitting down and writing as many of those thoughts you can, so that you can shift yourself into a real rational focus on something true, basically. If you can do that, then you'll change your own life. So hope that's helped you. If anybody wants to talk to me about any of this stuff, you can book a call on my website, ollieanderson.co.uk/talk. Like I said, I have a free course about this stuff as well if you want to go deeper, ollieanderson.co.uk/system shock. But I hope this helped you. This helps me in my life. I don't really worry about stuff anymore. That is the truth. Everything is amazing overall. And it's basically because I got off the hamster wheel and I trained myself to not focus on unreal things, but to focus on something real. Peace.